The sound of pickaxes striking frozen earth echoed through the California mining camp as Jacob "Bear" Morrison crested the ridge above the valley. His massive frame silhouetted against the pale March sky of 1867. But it was the sight of a small figure hunched in the mud near the creek that made him pull his horse to an abrupt halt. Bear had spent the last 3 months alone in the Sierra Nevada mountains, trapping and hunting, living off the land as he had done for the past 7 years since the war ended. At 30 years old, he stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry a full-grown deer across them. His dark hair fell past his collar, wild and untamed, matching the thick beard that covered his jaw. Muscles rippled beneath his buckskin jacket, earned from years of splitting wood, hauling traps, and surviving in the wilderness. He had left civilization behind after watching too many good men die at Gettysburg, preferring the honest brutality of nature to the company of other people. The mining camp of Broken Creek was supposed to be a quick stop for supplies before he headed back into the mountains. He had no intention of staying longer than necessary. The place was rough even by frontier standards, a collection of tents and ramshackle buildings thrown together by men chasing gold fever. Bear had been here twice before and found it loud, dirty, and mean. But the figure by the creek caught his attention because something was clearly wrong. Even from this distance, Bear could see the person was small and struggling, digging frantically in the mud with bare hands. The spring runoff had turned the area into a freezing morass, and whoever it was seemed desperate. Bear guided his horse down the slope, his hunter's instincts telling him this situation spelled trouble. As he drew closer, he realized with surprise that the figure was a woman, and not just any woman. Even covered in mud, he could see she was Chinese, her long black hair hanging in tangles around her face, her clothes soaked through and clinging to her small frame. She looked up as his horse approached, and Bear saw fear flash across her delicate features before she quickly looked down again, digging even more frantically. "Ma'am," Bear said, his voice rough from disuse. He dismounted, approaching slowly as he would a spooked animal. "What are you doing?" She did not answer, just kept digging, her small hands raw and bleeding. Bear noticed she was shivering violently, her lips tinged blue from the cold. He could also see she was young, probably early 20s, with high cheekbones and almond-shaped eyes that darted nervously between him and whatever she was searching for in the mud. "You are going to freeze to death," Bear said, more forcefully this time. He shrugged off his heavy coat, intending to put it around her shoulders, but she flinched away from him so violently that she slipped in the mud and fell backward. Bear stopped, holding his hands up to show he meant no harm. That was when he heard the voices coming from the camp, angry and getting closer. "Find that thieving Chinese girl," a man shouted. "She stole from me, probably hid it in the creek," another voice answered. "Chinese are like rats, always hiding things." Bear looked down at the woman, understanding dawning. She was not just digging randomly. She was searching for something, and she was terrified. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Bear saw something he recognized in her gaze. It was the same look he had seen in the eyes of soldiers trapped behind enemy lines, the desperate determination to survive against impossible odds. He made a decision that would change everything. "Get up," Bear said quietly but firmly. He reached down and, before she could protest, lifted her effortlessly from the mud. She was lighter than he expected, practically weightless in his arms. She struggled briefly, trying to speak in Cantonese, but Bear was already moving. He set her on his horse and swung up behind her, wrapping his coat around both of them. "Hold on," he said, and kicked the horse into motion. They had barely made it 20 yards when 5 men burst out of the trees near the creek. Bear recognized the leader, a mean-spirited prospector named Colton who ran one of the larger claims. The man's face was red with anger and whiskey. "Morrison," Colton shouted. "That is my property you got there. She stole a gold nugget from my tent." Bear did not slow down. "I do not see any property, just a woman half frozen in the creek." "She is Chinese. She belongs to the camp. Her father sold her to work off his debts." Colton was running now, trying to cut off Bear's path. The other men spread out, hands moving toward their weapons. Bear felt the woman tense in front of him. He tightened his arm around her waist, keeping her secure while he maneuvered the horse. His own rifle was strapped to the saddle, within easy reach, and every man in the territory knew Bear Morrison was not someone to trifle with. He had a reputation, earned the hard way, and it preceded him like a shadow. "I do not care what arrangement you think you have," Bear said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. "This woman is coming with me. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with the law in Sacramento." "The law," Colton laughed harshly. "The law does not care about Chinese, and you are harboring a thief." Bear's hand moved to his rifle, not drawing it but making his intention clear. "I am going to ride out of here now. You men can go back to your claims or you can try to stop me. But I promise you, it will not end well if you choose the second option." There was a long moment of tension. The 5 men looked at each other, weighing their options. They all knew Bear's reputation. He had killed a grizzly bear with nothing but a knife 3 years ago, which was how he got his nickname. He had also put down 2 claim jumpers who tried to ambush him and left them for the wolves. Bear Morrison was not a man who made idle threats. Finally, Colton spat in the dirt. "You are making a mistake, Morrison. That girl is trouble. She is nothing but a lying little thief and worse. She claims to be some kind of princess or some nonsense. She is crazy." "Then you should be glad to be rid of her," Bear said and urged his horse forward. This time, the men did not try to stop him. Bear rode through the camp at a steady pace, aware of the eyes watching from every tent and building. The woman in front of him had stopped shivering quite so violently, whether from the warmth of his coat or shock, he could not tell. She had not said a word since he picked her up. He did not stop until they were well clear of the camp. A good 2 miles up into the foothills where the pine trees grew thick, and the sound of the creek faded to a distant murmur. Only then did he slow the horse and finally halt in a small clearing he had used as a campsite before. Bear dismounted and reached up to help the woman down. She looked at him with those dark eyes, still wary, but allowed him to lift her from the saddle. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet touched the ground, and Bear steadied her with his hands on her shoulders. "Can you understand me?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "I speak English," she said, her voice soft but clear, with an accent that marked her as educated. "Thank you for helping me. I am sorry to bring trouble to you. What is your name?" She hesitated, and Bear saw a flash of something in her eyes, pride maybe or defiance. "My name is Mei Lin," she said. "Daughter of Lin Zexu, descendant of the Ming dynasty. In my country I was a princess." Bear studied her. Even covered in mud and shaking from cold, there was something regal about the way she held herself now that they were away from the camp. Her chin lifted despite her obvious fear, and her eyes met his without flinching. "A princess," Bear said slowly. "That is what Colton meant." "He does not believe me. None of them do. They think I am a liar or crazy." Mei Lin's hands clenched at her sides. "My family sent me to America to escape political persecution. We had money, gold, to start a new life. But the ship's captain betrayed us. He took everything and sold me to a labor contractor in San Francisco. I have been passed from place to place for 2 years, always told I must work to pay off debts I never owed." Bear had heard similar stories before. The Chinese who came to California for the gold rush often faced terrible treatment, especially the women. He had tried not to think about it too much, focusing instead on his own survival in the mountains. But now, looking at Mei Lin's bleeding hands and haunted eyes, he could not look away. "Did you steal from Colton?" he asked. Mei Lin's jaw tightened. "I found something in the creek that belonged to me, a jade pendant my mother gave me before I left China. Colton took it from me when I first arrived at the camp, said it was payment for my food. I saw it in his tent yesterday and I took it back. Then I dropped it when I was running from him and it fell in the mud by the creek. So you were trying to find it?" "Yes." Tears suddenly filled her eyes, though she blinked them back fiercely. "It is all I have left of my family. Everything else is gone. I thought if I could just find it, I would have one piece of home." Bear felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he had kept buried for years. He knew what it was like to lose everything, to have the world stripped away until nothing familiar remained. After the war, he had burned the letters from home, unable to face returning to a place that would only remind him of who he used to be. "Wait here," he said. Bear walked to his horse and pulled a blanket from his pack, along with dry clothes. His spare shirt and pants would be enormous on Mei Lin, but they would be warm. He handed them to her and pointed to a thick stand of trees. "Get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death. I will make a fire." Mei Lin looked at the clothes, then at him, surprise clear on her face. "You believe me about being a princess. I do not know, but I believe you have had a hard time, and I believe Colton is a liar and a cheat. That is enough for now." Bear paused. "Go on, I will not look." She nodded and hurried behind the trees. Bear busied himself gathering wood and building a fire, his mind working through the implications of what he had just done. He had made enemies of half the camp by taking Mei Lin. Word would spread, and there would be consequences. Colton was not the type to let this go. But when Mei Lin emerged from the trees, swimming in his clothes with the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her hair dripping but her face clean of mud, Bear knew he had made the right choice. She looked impossibly young and vulnerable, but there was steel in her spine as she walked to the fire and sat down. "I need to go back to the creek," Mei Lin said. "I have to find my pendant." "Too dangerous," Bear said, stirring the fire. "Colton and his men will be watching." "Then I will go at night. You will freeze. Spring nights are still cold this high up." Bear looked at her seriously. "And even if you made it to the creek, Colton would have men posted. He knows you might come back." Mei Lin's face fell, the brief moment of determination crumbling. "Then it is lost, just like everything else." Bear was quiet for a long moment, watching the flames. He was not good with words of comfort. He had spent too many years alone, forgotten how to talk to people about anything except practical matters. But something about Mei Lin's defeat bothered him deeply. "Tell me exactly where you dropped it," he said finally. Mei Lin looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "You will help me find it?" "I will try. But first, you need to eat and rest. You are exhausted." Bear pulled dried venison and hardtack from his pack. It was not much, but it was food. "Eat this. Then we will make a plan." As Mei Lin ate, Bear studied her more carefully. Now that she was clean and the immediate danger had passed, he could see she was truly beautiful. Her features were delicate but strong, her eyes intelligent and expressive. The oversized clothes made her look even smaller, but Bear noticed the way she carried herself, the unconscious grace in her movements. Maybe she really had been a princess. It would explain the way she spoke, the education evident in her perfect English. "How did you learn to speak English so well?" Bear asked. "My father believed China needed to learn from the West to survive. He hired tutors for me and my brothers. I studied English, French, history, mathematics." Mei Lin smiled sadly. My father dreamed of modernizing our country, of bringing new ideas home. Instead, we had to flee because of those same ideas. What happened? Politics and power. There are those in the imperial court who fear change. My father spoke too loudly about reform, made too many enemies. Mei Lin wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. One night, soldiers came to our home. We barely escaped. My father used all his connections to get us on a ship to America. He said we would be safe here, that we could start over. Where is your family now? Mei Lin's eyes filled with tears again. I do not know. We were separated in San Francisco. The captain who betrayed us, he had men waiting at the dock. They took me and my younger sister. I watched them drag my father away when he tried to fight. I have not seen any of them since. Bear felt a surge of anger at the injustice of it. Mei Lin had done nothing wrong except be born into a dangerous situation. She had lost everything through no fault of her own, just like so many others he had known during the war. Your sister, Bear said. Is she still in San Francisco? I think so. The contractor who owned my debt said she was sold to a merchant family as a servant, but I do not know if that is true. I do not know anything. Mei Lin wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I tried to find out, tried to escape and search for her, but they always caught me. Eventually, they sent me to the mining camps where it would be harder to run. That was 6 months ago. How old are you? Bear asked. 22. My sister is 19. Mei Lin looked at him. How old are you? 30. Bear added more wood to the fire. I have been in these mountains for 7 years. Before that, I was a soldier in the war, the Civil War. Yes, I fought for the Union, saw too much death, too much suffering. Bear stared into the flames. When it ended, I could not go back to normal life. I came west and kept going until I found a place where the world made sense again. And does it make sense here? Bear considered that. The mountains do not lie. If you respect them, they provide. If you are careless, they kill you. It is honest in a way people never are. Mei Lin nodded slowly. I understand that. I have learned that people often wear masks, pretending to be something they are not. The ship captain who smiled and promised to take care of us. The contractor who said he was helping me pay off my father's debt when there was no debt. The miners who look at me and see only something to use. Is that how you see me? Bear asked. Something to use. Mei Lin met his eyes. No, I think you are the first honest person I have met in America. You helped me even though it brought you trouble. You gave me clothes and food without asking for anything. I do not know why, but I am grateful. I am not a good man, Bear said. I have killed people. I have done things in war that I cannot take back. But I do not hurt women, and I do not stand by when I see someone in trouble. It is not much of a code, but it is all I have. It is more than most people have, Mei Lin said softly. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Bear found himself acutely aware of Mei Lin's presence, the way the firelight played across her face, the delicate curve of her neck. He had been alone for so long that he had forgotten what it was like to sit with another person, to share a moment of quiet companionship. You should sleep, Bear said finally. I will keep watch. What about you? I am used to staying awake. I will be fine. Mei Lin looked like she wanted to protest, but exhaustion was clearly winning. She lay down near the fire, wrapping the blanket around herself. Thank you, Bear Morrison. I will not forget your kindness. Just Bear, he said. Nobody calls me Morrison anymore. Bear, Mei Lin repeated and smiled. It suits you. You are large and strong like a bear, but not as frightening as people say. Bear grunted, not sure how to respond to that. He watched as Mei Lin's eyes slowly closed, her breathing evening out as sleep claimed her. In the firelight, she looked impossibly young and peaceful, all the fear and tension smoothing from her features. Bear stood and walked to the edge of the clearing. his mind working. He had promised to help Mei Lin find her pendant, which meant going back to the camp. But it also meant confronting Colton and his men, which could turn violent quickly. Bear was not afraid of a fight, but he was one man against many. More than that, Bear realized he was thinking beyond just recovering the pendant. Mei Lin had nowhere to go, no one to help her. If he simply found her pendant and left her, she would be right back where she started, at the mercy of men like Colton. The thought bothered him more than it should. He could take her to Sacramento, he supposed. Maybe find her work with a decent family or help her search for her sister. But even as he thought it, Bear knew that was not enough. Mei Lin deserved better than to be passed from one uncertain situation to another. Bear looked back at the sleeping figure by the fire. In the span of a few hours, she had become his responsibility, whether he wanted it or not. And the truth was, he did want it. For the first time in 7 years, Bear felt something other than the numb detachment that had carried him through his solitary existence. He felt protective, purposeful, alive. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. As the night deepened and the stars wheeled overhead, Bear kept his vigil. He fed the fire and listened to the sounds of the forest, his hunter's senses alert for any sign of trouble. Twice he heard movement in the darkness and reached for his rifle, but both times it was only deer passing through. When dawn began to paint the eastern sky with streaks of pink and gold, Mei Lin stirred. She sat up slowly, looking momentarily confused before her eyes found Bear and memory returned. She smiled tentatively, and Bear felt his heart do something strange in his chest. "Good morning," Mei Lin said. "Morning," Bear replied. He had coffee brewing over the fire, strong and bitter the way he liked it. He poured a cup and handed it to her. "Drink this. It will help wake you up." Mei Lin took the cup gratefully, wrapping her small hands around it for warmth. She sipped carefully, made a face at the bitter taste, but kept drinking. "Thank you. Did you sleep at all?" "Enough," Bear lied. "I have been thinking about your pendant. I am going back to the creek tonight after dark to look for it." "I will come with you." "No, too dangerous." "It is my pendant. I should be there." Mei Lin's chin lifted stubbornly. "And I know exactly where I dropped it. You might search all night in the wrong place." Bear wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in her eyes. She was not going to back down on this. "Fine. But you do exactly as I say when I say it. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" "Understood." They spent the day preparing. Bear scouted the area around the camp from a distance, watching the movements of the miners and looking for patterns. Colton had indeed posted men near the creek, 2 of them taking shifts throughout the day. But Bear also noticed that they got careless after dark, huddling around their own fire and passing a bottle between them. As evening fell, Bear and Mei Lin ate a cold meal of jerky and wild onions Bear had dug up. Mei Lin had changed back into her own clothes, which had dried by the fire, though they were still stained with mud. She looked nervous but resolute, her hands steady as she braided her hair back from her face. "Ready?" Bear asked. Mei Lin nodded. "Ready." They moved through the forest like shadows, Bear leading the way with Mei Lin close behind. He had taught her the basics during the day, how to place her feet to avoid snapping branches, how to move with the natural rhythms of the forest. She was a quick learner, adapting quickly to his instructions. The camp was quieter at night. Most of the miners turned in early to rise with the dawn. Lights flickered in a few tents, and Bear could hear voices raised in argument from the main building where they sold whiskey. The 2 guards at the creek were right where he had expected them to be, sitting by a fire and drinking. Bear and Mei Lin circled wide, approaching the creek from downstream where the trees grew thick. The sound of running water covered any small noises they made. When they reached the spot, Mei Lin had indicated, Bear held up a hand for her to stop. The mud had dried somewhat during the day, forming a crusty surface that cracked under Bear's boots. In the moonlight, it was hard to see details, but Mei Lin dropped to her knees immediately and began searching, her hands moving quickly over the ground. Bear kept watch, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign they had been spotted. The guards were barely visible through the trees, their fire a distant orange glow. He could hear their laughter carrying on the night air. Mei Lin worked methodically, her fingers probing every crack and depression in the dried mud. Minutes passed, then more. Bear was beginning to worry they would have to abandon the search when Mei Lin made a soft sound of triumph. "I found it," she whispered, holding up something that glinted in the moonlight. Bear turned to look, and even in the darkness, he could see it was a beautiful piece of jade carved in an intricate pattern, suspended on a silk cord. Mei Lin clutched it to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you. We need to go," Bear said quietly. "Now." They had taken perhaps 10 steps back toward the trees when a voice rang out. "Stop right there." Bear cursed silently. One of the guards had wandered closer to the creek, probably to relieve himself, and spotted them. The man was already raising a rifle. "Run," Bear said to Mei Lin and pushed her ahead of him toward the forest. The guard fired, the shot echoing through the night like thunder. Bear felt the bullet whip past his head, close enough that he felt the air displacement. He turned and fired back, not aiming to kill but to slow the man down. His shot hit the ground near the guard's feet, sending up a spray of mud. More shouts erupted from the camp as men poured out of tents and buildings, alerted by the gunfire. Bear ran after Mei Lin, his longer legs eating up the ground. He caught up to her just as they reached the tree line and grabbed her hand, pulling her deeper into the forest. Behind them, torches were being lit. Bear could hear Colton's voice bellowing orders, organizing a search party. There would be a dozen men or more coming after them within minutes. Bear led Mei Lin through the trees at a punishing pace, following paths only he could see in the darkness. Mei Lin stumbled several times, but each time Bear was there to catch her, his strong arm keeping her upright. They ran until Bear was sure they had put enough distance between themselves and the camp. Then he pulled Mei Lin into a thick tangle of undergrowth and signaled for silence. They crouched there, breathing hard as the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Torchlight flickered through the trees. Men's voices called out, angry and determined. Bear put his arm around Mei Lin, feeling her trembling against him, and held his rifle ready with his other hand. The searchers passed within 20 feet of their hiding spot, but Bear had chosen well. The undergrowth was too thick for casual exploration, and the pursuers were more interested in covering ground than conducting a thorough search. After several tense minutes, the voices faded into the distance. Bear waited a full hour before moving again. When he finally stood, pulling Mei Lin up with him, the camp sounds had disappeared entirely. The forest was silent except for the whisper of wind through pine needles. "Are you hurt?" Bear asked quietly. Mei Lin shook her head. "I am fine, just scared." "You did well. You kept up and stayed quiet." Bear kept his hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "But we need to keep moving. They will search again at first light, and we need to be far away by then." They walked through the remainder of the night, Bear setting a steady pace that ate up the miles without exhausting them. He was heading deeper into the mountains, toward territory he knew intimately. There were places up there where no one would find them, hidden valleys and caves where Bear had weathered storms and waited out the hardest months of winter. Dawn found them climbing a steep ridge, the camp far behind them. Mei Lin was clearly exhausted, her steps becoming uneven, but she never complained. Bear admired her toughness, The way she kept pushing even when he could see she was at the end of her strength. Finally, as the sun broke over the peaks and painted the world in gold, Bear called a halt. They had reached a small meadow tucked into a fold of the mountains, with a stream running through it and a rock outcropping that would provide shelter. "We will rest here," Bear said. "You need sleep." Mei Lin collapsed onto the grass, breathing hard. The jade pendant was still clutched in her hand, and she looked at it now with an expression of such relief and joy that Bear felt his chest tighten. "I thought I had lost it forever," Mei Lin said softly. "This pendant has been in my family for 200 years. My mother gave it to me and told me to keep it safe, that as long as I had it, I would always carry a piece of home with me." Bear watched as she carefully fastened the pendant around her neck. Against her skin, the jade seemed to glow with an inner light. "It is beautiful," he said. "It is priceless." Mei Lin touched the pendant gently, not because of its value in money but because of what it represents. "My family's history, my mother's love. I would have died trying to get it back." "I know," Bear said, and he did. He understood the importance of holding on to something that connected you to a better time, a better version of yourself. He had carried his father's pocket watch through the entire war, only losing it at Gettysburg when he was wounded. He still dreamed about it sometimes, wondering where it had ended up. They made camp in the meadow, Bear setting up a simple lean-to shelter against the rocks while Mei Lin washed in the stream. When she returned, her hair wet and her face clean, she looked more like herself, the fear and exhaustion finally lifting from her features. Bear had food cooking over the fire, fresh trout he had pulled from the stream with his hands. Mei Lin watched in amazement as he worked, his large hands deft and skilled. "Where did you learn to do all this?" she asked. "My father taught me to hunt and fish when I was a boy. We lived in Pennsylvania, had a farm near the mountains. He used to take me camping every summer." Bear flipped the fish expertly. "The rest I learned from necessity. When you live alone in the wilderness, you either learn fast or you die." "Do you miss your family?" Bear was quiet for a long moment. "My parents died while I was at war. Fever took them both within a week of each other. My sister wrote to tell me, but the letter did not reach me until months later. By the time I made it home, they were long buried and my sister had married and moved to Boston. There was nothing left for me there." "I am sorry," Mei Lin said gently. "It was a long time ago." Bear pulled the fish from the fire and divided it between 2 plates. "Eat. You need your strength." They ate in comfortable silence, the morning sun warming the meadow. Birds sang in the trees, and somewhere in the distance, Bear could hear the bugle of an elk. It was peaceful here, removed from the chaos and violence of the mining camp. "What happens now?" Mei Lin asked when they had finished eating. Bear had been thinking about that all night. "We have some options. I can take you to Sacramento and help you search for your sister. Or I can take you further north, to Oregon Territory, where there are other Chinese communities. You might find people who can help you. What do you think I should do?" "I think you should decide what you want, not what you think you should do or what other people expect." Bear looked at her seriously. "You have been told what to do for 2 years. It is time you had a choice." Mei Lin considered that, her fingers absently touching the jade pendant. "I want to find my sister and my father, but I do not know where to start. San Francisco is dangerous for me now. The contractor who owned my debt has connections there, people who would recognize me. Then we avoid San Francisco. We go to Sacramento first, ask questions carefully. Someone might know something about your family." Bear hesitated, then added, "I will help you look, for as long as it takes." Mei Lin's eyes widened. "You would do that, but what about your life here in the mountains? The mountains will still be here." Bear fed another stick into the fire. "And I am tired of being alone. Maybe it is time I did something that mattered again." "I matter," Mei Lin asked softly. Bear met her eyes. Yes, you matter. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went beyond words. Mei Lin smiled, and Bear felt that strange sensation in his chest again, like something frozen was beginning to thaw. They spent 2 more days in the meadow, resting and planning. Bear taught Mei Lin more about surviving in the wilderness, showing her how to identify edible plants, how to read animal tracks, how to predict weather by watching the sky. Mei Lin proved an eager student, absorbing everything he taught her with quick intelligence. In turn, Mei Lin told Bear about her life in China, painting vivid pictures of a world he could barely imagine. She described the palace gardens where she had walked as a child, the festivals with their colorful lanterns, the poetry competitions where scholars would gather to show off their skills. She told him about her sister, Mei Hua, who loved to paint and dreamed of becoming an artist. She spoke of her father, a man of principle who had sacrificed everything for his beliefs. Bear found himself fascinated by her stories, by the glimpses into a culture so different from his own. But more than that, he was fascinated by Mei Lin herself. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, a combination of strength and gentleness, intelligence and grace. Despite everything she had been through, she had not lost her spirit or her capacity for joy. On the 3rd day, they broke camp and began the journey to Sacramento. Bear knew the way well, following trails that avoided the main roads and kept them away from populated areas. They traveled slowly, stopping often to rest, falling into an easy rhythm together. At night, they made camp and talked by the fire. Bear found himself sharing things he had never told anyone, memories of the war that still haunted him, fears he had carried for years. Mei Lin listened without judgment, her presence somehow making it easier to speak. I dream about Gettysburg sometimes, Bear said one night, staring into the flames. I see the faces of men I killed, boys really, no older than 18 or 19. I try to tell myself it was war, that I was just doing my duty, but it does not make it easier. You carry their weight, Mei Lin said quietly. In China, we believe the dead stay with us until we find a way to honor their memory and let them go. Perhaps these soldiers stay with you because you have not forgiven yourself. How do you forgive yourself for taking lives? By living a life that honors their sacrifice, by being a good man doing good things, by not wasting the chance they no longer have. Mei Lin reached out and touched his hand. You saved me from a terrible fate. That means something. Those soldiers would want you to keep saving people, keep being the man who sees someone in trouble and helps them. Bear looked down at her small hand on his. Her touch was warm, gentle, and it stirred something deep inside him. You are wise for someone so young. I have had to grow up quickly. Mei Lin smiled sadly. But I think wisdom has less to do with age and more to do with how much pain you have survived. They reached Sacramento after a week of travel. The city was booming, growing rapidly as the railroad pushed east and trade flourished. The streets were crowded with people from all walks of life: Chinese, Mexican, European immigrants, former slaves seeking new lives in the West. It was chaotic and loud, and Bear hated it immediately. But they had come for a purpose, and Bear was determined to see it through. They found a modest boarding house on the edge of Chinatown, where the proprietor, an elderly Chinese woman named Mrs. Chen, agreed to rent them 2 rooms without asking too many questions. Bear paid in gold dust, which spoke louder than any credentials. Mrs. Chen looked at Mei Lin with shrewd eyes. You have the bearing of someone educated, she said in Cantonese, which Bear did not understand. But you travel with a white mountain man. This is unusual. Mei Lin responded in the same language, and Bear watched as the 2 women talked rapidly. Finally, Mrs. Chen nodded and turned to Bear. "I will help you," she said in accented English. "This girl has had much trouble. I know people who know things. I will ask about her family." "Thank you," Bear said. Over the next few days, Mrs. Chen worked her network of contacts throughout Chinatown. She sent messages, asked questions, and slowly began to piece together information. Bear stayed close to Mei Lin, accompanying her whenever she left the boarding house. He was acutely aware of the stares they drew, the mountain man and the Chinese girl, but he ignored them. Mei Lin used the time to transform herself back into something resembling the princess she had been. Mrs. Chen provided proper Chinese clothing, and Mei Lin carefully washed and braided her hair, adding small ornaments that Mrs. Chen loaned her. The change was remarkable. Dressed in a silk tunic and pants with her hair styled properly, Mei Lin looked every inch the noblewoman she claimed to be. Bear found himself unable to look away. She had always been beautiful, but now there was a confidence in the way she carried herself, a return of the dignity that had been stripped from her during her captivity. "You are staring," Mei Lin said, catching him watching her. "Sorry," Bear said, looking away. "You look different." "Good different. I feel like myself again," Mei Lin admitted. "For the first time in 2 years, I feel like I am not just surviving, but living." That evening, Mrs. Chen called them to her private sitting room. Her expression was grave, and Bear felt his stomach tighten with anticipation. "I have news," Mrs. Chen said, "about your family." Mei Lin leaned forward eagerly. "You found them. Your sister, yes. Your father, no." Mrs. Chen pulled out a piece of paper covered in Chinese characters. "Your sister, Mei Hua, is in San Francisco. She works as a servant for a merchant family named Wang. They are respectable people, treat their servants well. Is she safe? Is she happy? She is alive and unharmed. Whether she is happy I cannot say. The Wangs keep their household private." Mrs. Chen paused, "But there is more. Your father was seen in San Francisco 6 months ago. He was asking about you and your sister, trying to find you. But then he disappeared. Some say he went north to Oregon. Others say he returned to China. No one knows for certain." Mei Lin's face fell. "He was looking for us." "All this time he was looking." Bear put his hand on her shoulder. "Then we will find him. First, we go to San Francisco and get your sister. Then we search for your father together." "San Francisco is dangerous for her," Mrs. Chen warned. "The contractor who held her debt, his name is Zhang Wei. He is a powerful man, has many connections. If he discovers Mei Lin is in the city, there will be trouble." "Then we will be careful," Bear said. "But we are going." Mrs. Chen looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You are a good man, Bear Morrison. Mei Lin is fortunate to have found you." They left for San Francisco the next morning, traveling by stagecoach this time. Bear was uncomfortable in the enclosed space, surrounded by strangers, but Mei Lin seemed energized by the prospect of finding her sister. She talked the entire journey, making plans and speculating about how they would approach the Wang family. San Francisco was even larger and more chaotic than Sacramento. The city sprawled across hills overlooking the bay, a jumble of buildings and streets teeming with life. Bear had been here once before, years ago, and had vowed never to return. But for Mei Lin, he would endure it. They found lodging in a small hotel near the waterfront, 2 rooms again for the sake of propriety, though Bear noticed the desk clerk's skeptical expression. Bear did not care what people thought. His only concern was keeping Mei Lin safe. Finding the Wang household proved easier than expected. They were a well-known family in Chinatown, and their large house was impossible to miss. Bear and Mei Lin watched the house for a day, observing the comings and goings. They saw several servants, but no sign of Mei Hua. "We need to get inside," Mei Lin said. I need to see her to make sure it is really her. Too risky. If this Zhang Wei has people watching for you, walking into a Chinese household would be like announcing your presence. Bear thought for a moment. We need to get her outside, somewhere we can talk without being observed. How? Bear smiled grimly. We send a message. One that only she would understand. With Mei Lin's help, Bear crafted a note in Chinese describing a memory that only Mei Hua would know. A specific incident from their childhood involving a koi pond and an angry cook. They paid a street urchin to deliver the note to the Wang household, specifically to the young servant woman with the sad eyes. Then they waited. It took 2 days, but finally, on the evening of the second day, a young woman emerged from the Wang house alone. She walked quickly, her head down, but Bear recognized the family resemblance immediately. She had the same delicate features as Mei Lin, the same grace in her movements. Mei Lin saw her sister and made a sound of pure joy. She started forward, but Bear caught her arm. Wait. Make sure she is alone, that no one followed her. They watched as Mei Hua walked to a small park near the waterfront. She sat on a bench, looking around nervously. Bear scanned the area carefully but saw no signs of surveillance. Now, he said. Mei Lin practically ran across the street, and Mei Hua looked up just as her sister reached her. For a moment, both women froze, staring at each other as if unable to believe their eyes. Then they were in each other's arms, crying and talking rapidly in Cantonese. Bear hung back, giving them space but keeping watch. He saw the joy on both their faces, the way they held each other as if afraid to let go. It made something twist in his chest, a mixture of happiness for them and loneliness for himself. After several minutes, Mei Lin beckoned him over. Mei Hua looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes, but Mei Lin spoke quickly, clearly explaining who he was. Gradually, Mei Hua's expression shifted from fear to cautious trust. My sister says you saved her life, Mei Hua said in halting English. Thank you. You are welcome, Bear said. Are you all right? Are they treating you well? The Wangs are good people. They give me food and a place to sleep. I am not beaten or abused. Mei Hua glanced back at the house nervously. But I am not free. I am told I must work for 10 years to pay off a debt. There is no debt, Mei Lin said fiercely. Father had money. We were betrayed and robbed, but we owed nothing. I know. But Zhang Wei has papers, documents he says father signed. The Wangs believe I am here legally, working off a contract. Bear's jaw tightened. We are going to get you out of here. Both of you will be free. How? Mei Hua asked. Zhang Wei is powerful. He has men everywhere. If I run, they will find me and bring me back. It would be worse for the Wangs too. They paid Zhang Wei for my contract. Leave that to me, Bear said. First, tell us about your father. Do you know where he is? Mei Hua nodded eagerly. He was here 6 months ago. He found me, talked to me outside the house like we are doing now. He said he was going to get money, enough to buy back both our contracts and hire a lawyer. He was going to Oregon to work in the timber camps. He said he would return before winter. But he did not return, Mei Lin said. No, winter came and went. I have heard nothing. Mei Hua's eyes filled with tears. I am afraid something happened to him. The timber camps are dangerous. Men die there all the time. Bear thought quickly. Oregon is not that far. I can go there, search the camps, find out what happened to your father. But first, we need to secure your freedom, both of you. How? Mei Lin asked. We buy out your sister's contract from the Wangs. Legally properly, so Zhang Wei cannot claim she was stolen. Bear looked at Mei Hua. How much did the Wangs pay for your contract? $200, Mei Hua said quietly. It was a significant sum, but Bear had gold dust saved from years of trapping and panning. I have it. We make the Wangs an offer, pay them back what they spent plus some extra for their trouble. That way there is no debt and no legal claim. Zhang Wei will not like it, Mei Hua warned. I do not care what Zhang Wei likes, Bear said flatly. Once the contract is legally dissolved, you are free. If Zhang Wei has a problem with that, he can take it up with me. Over the next few days, Bear worked to arrange the transaction. He enlisted the help of a Chinese lawyer recommended by Mrs. Chen's contacts, a sharp-eyed young man named David Lin who had studied law at university and specialized in helping Chinese immigrants navigate the complex legal system. David Lin reviewed the contract and confirmed that it was, technically, legal under California law, though morally reprehensible. The contract system is designed to trap people in perpetual servitude, he explained. But if we can get the Wongs to agree to dissolve the contract in exchange for payment, and if we have witnesses and proper documentation, then Mei Hua will be legally free. Approaching the Wongs proved delicate. Bear could not do it himself without raising suspicions, so David Lin went as their representative, accompanied by Mei Lin dressed in her finest clothes and wearing her jade pendant openly. Bear waited anxiously at the hotel, pacing like a caged animal. It was late afternoon when they returned, and he knew immediately from Mei Lin's expression that it had gone well. They agreed, Mei Lin said, her face glowing with happiness. Mr. Wang was surprised, but when David explained the situation and I showed him our family seal on the pendant, he understood. He is a decent man. He said he never wanted to participate in the contract system, but felt he had no choice if he needed workers. Did he want the $200? He wanted only what he originally paid, nothing more. He said keeping a woman from her family was not honorable. Mei Lin's eyes shone with unshed tears. Tomorrow we sign the papers. Tomorrow my sister will be free. Bear felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Good, that is good. That night, Bear could not sleep. He stood at the window of his hotel room, looking out over the glittering lights of San Francisco. So much had changed in just a few weeks. He had gone from a solitary mountain man with no ties to anyone to a man responsible for 2 women's lives and happiness. It should have terrified him. Instead, he felt more alive than he had in years. There was a soft knock at his door. Bear opened it to find Mei Lin standing in the hallway, wearing a simple robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. I cannot sleep, she said. May I come in? Bear knew it was improper, that he should send her back to her own room, but he stepped aside and let her enter. Mei Lin walked to the window, looking out at the city. I keep thinking about how my life has changed since you found me in the mud, she said softly. I was so desperate that day, so hopeless. I thought I would die in that camp, that I would never see my family again. Then you appeared like something out of a story. I am no hero, Bear said. I just did what anyone should do, but most people would not. Mei Lin turned to face him. Most people would have ridden past, or worse, taken advantage of the situation. You risked your life for a stranger. You have given me everything, asked for nothing in return. You do not owe me anything, Mei Lin. I know. That is what makes it mean even more. Mei Lin took a step closer to him. In the dim light, her face was luminous, her eyes dark and deep. Bear, I need to tell you something. I have feelings for you. Feelings that go beyond gratitude. I do not know when it started, perhaps that first night by the fire, or maybe when I watched you face down Colton's men without fear. But I know that when I think about the future, I cannot imagine it without you in it. Bear's heart was pounding. He wanted to reach out and pull her into his arms, but he forced himself to stay still. Mei Lin, you have been through a terrible ordeal. Your emotions are confused. Once you are reunited with your family, once you have had time to build a normal life, you will feel differently. No. Mei Lin shook her head firmly. I know my own heart. I am not a child, Bear. I am a grown woman who has survived things that would break most people. And I am telling you that I care for you. Not because you saved me, but because of who you are. Your strength, your kindness, your honor, the way you listen when I talk about my home, the way you try to understand even when my world is so different from yours. I am 12 years older than you, Bear said, though his resolve was crumbling. I am rough, uneducated compared to you. I have killed men. I am not someone a princess should want. You are exactly who I want. Mei Lin closed the distance between them and placed her hand over his heart. I feel safe with you. I feel seen. For the first time since I came to America, I feel like I am home. Bear could not resist any longer. He cupped her face in his large hands, marveling at how delicate she was, how perfectly she fit against him. I care for you too, he admitted. More than I should. More than I have cared for anyone in a very long time, but I am afraid of failing you, of not being good enough. You are more than good enough, Mei Lin whispered. You are everything. Bear kissed her then, gentle at first, afraid of overwhelming her. But Mei Lin responded with a passion that surprised him, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body pressing against his. The kiss deepened, and Bear felt years of loneliness and isolation melt away in the warmth of her embrace. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Bear rested his forehead against hers. We should probably talk about this when we are thinking more clearly, he said. Mei Lin laughed softly. My thinking is very clear, but you are right. Tomorrow is an important day. I should let you rest. She started to pull away, but Bear caught her hand. Stay, he said. Just stay here tonight. I will sleep on the floor. I just want you near me. Mei Lin smiled and nodded. Bear gave her the bed and made himself a pallet on the floor, though he doubted he would sleep. They talked late into the night, voices soft in the darkness, sharing dreams and fears and plans for the future. Somewhere around midnight, Mei Lin drifted off to sleep. Bear listened to her steady breathing and felt a contentment he had never known. Whatever the future held, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would spend the rest of his life protecting this woman and making sure she never knew suffering again. The next day, the contract was formally dissolved in front of witnesses. Mei Hua was legally free, and Bear watched as the two sisters embraced again, crying tears of joy and relief. The Wangs were gracious about the entire affair, even hosting a small celebration dinner to mark the occasion. But Bear remained vigilant. Zhang Wei had not yet shown himself, but Bear knew the man would not take this lying down. Someone was losing a valuable asset, and men like that did not forget. His instincts proved correct. 3 days later, as they were preparing to leave San Francisco and head north to Oregon to search for Mei Lin's father, Zhang Wei finally made his move. Bear was at the waterfront making arrangements for their passage on a lumber ship heading up the coast when he saw them. 4 men, hard-faced and armed, moving through the crowd with purpose. They were heading toward the hotel where Mei Lin and Mei Hua were packing their belongings. Bear ran. He had never been a fast runner, his size working against him, but fear gave him speed. He burst into the hotel just as the 4 men were climbing the stairs. Bear took them 3 at a time, reaching the second-floor landing as the men reached Mei Lin's door. Get away from that door, Bear said, his voice deadly calm. The men turned. The leader, a scarred Chinese man with cold eyes, smiled without humor. This is not your business, mountain man. Zhang Wei wants his property back. Walk away and you will not be hurt. Those women are not property, they are free. Bear's hand moved to the knife at his belt. He had left his rifle at the hotel, not expecting trouble so soon. You are not taking them anywhere. There are 4 of us and 1 of you, the leader said. Be smart. I have faced worse odds, Bear said. The leader nodded and 2 of his men rushed forward. Bear met them head-on. his fist connecting with the first man's jaw hard enough to drop him instantly. The second man pulled a knife, slashing at Bear's midsection. Bear twisted away, feeling the blade tear through his shirt but miss flesh, and brought his elbow down on the man's arm. Bone cracked and the man screamed. The leader and the fourth man drew pistols, but Bear was already moving. He grabbed the wounded knife wielder and threw him into the leader, sending both men tumbling backward. The fourth man fired, the bullet smashing into the wall inches from Bear's head. Bear charged, closing the distance before the man could fire again. He grabbed the pistol and wrenched it away, then drove his fist into the man's stomach with enough force to lift him off his feet. The man collapsed, gasping for air. The leader had regained his feet and was aiming his pistol at Bear's chest. Time seemed to slow. Bear saw the man's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the muzzle flash. Then Mei Lin was there, throwing herself in front of Bear with a scream of no. Bear grabbed her and spun, using his body to shield her as the bullet struck him high on the left shoulder instead of center mass. Pain exploded through him, but Bear held onto Mei Lin, keeping her safe as he staggered back. The leader aimed again, but this time David Lin appeared at the top of the stairs with a shotgun. "Stop, I have sent for the police. Leave now or face arrest." The leader hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Then he spat on the floor and gestured to his men. "This is not over, Mountain Man. Zhang Wei always collects his debts." They retreated down the stairs, dragging their wounded companions. David Lin kept the shotgun trained on them until they were out of sight, then rushed to Bear. "You are shot. We need a doctor." "I am fine," Bear said through gritted teeth, though blood was already soaking through his shirt. "Check on Mei Hua." Mei Lin was crying, her hands pressed against Bear's wound trying to stop the bleeding. "You are not fine. You took a bullet meant for me. Why did you do that?" "Because I love you," Bear said simply, and then the world went gray around the edges as shock set in. He woke up in a doctor's office, the sharp smell of carbolic acid burning his nose. Someone had removed his shirt and bandaged his shoulder. The pain was intense, a throbbing ache that radiated down his arm, but Bear had experienced worse during the war. Mei Lin sat beside the bed, holding his hand. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes red from crying. When she saw him awake, she let out a sob of relief. "Thank God. The doctor said you would be fine, but I was so frightened. You lost so much blood." "Takes more than a bullet to kill me," Bear said, trying to smile. "Where is your sister?" With David Lin. "He is making sure the police understand what happened, that Zhang Wei sent those men." Mei Lin gripped his hand tighter. "Bear, you should not have done that. You could have died." "Better me than you," Bear said. "I have lived my life, Mei Lin. You still have so much ahead of you. Do not say that." Mei Lin's voice broke. "Do not act like your life does not matter. You matter to me. When I saw that gun pointed at you, I thought my heart would stop. I cannot lose you, Bear. I cannot." Bear reached up with his good arm and pulled her down to him. "You are not going to lose me. I am too stubborn to die. Ask anyone who served with me in the war." Mei Lin buried her face in his neck, her tears hot against his skin. "I was so scared. I have never been so scared." "I know, I am sorry." Bear stroked her hair gently. "But we are safe now. Your sister is safe. Zhang Wei made his move and failed. The law is involved now. He will not try again." "How can you be sure?" "Because he is a businessman, not a fighter. He relies on intimidation and legal manipulation. Now that David Lin has documentation of the assault and the police are investigating, Zhang Wei will back off. The risk is too high and the reward too small." Bear was proven right over the next few days. Zhang Wei sent a message through intermediaries expressing his regret over the misunderstanding and wishing them well on their travels. It was a face-saving gesture, but it was also a retreat. Zhang Wei was cutting his losses. The doctor kept Bear in bed for a week, insisting he needed to rest and let the wound heal. Bear chafed at the inactivity, but secretly he was grateful for the time. It allowed him to simply exist with Mei Lin, to talk and plan without the constant pressure of danger and movement. Mei Hua visited daily, bringing food and keeping them company. Bear found himself enjoying the younger sister's presence. She was quieter than Mei Lin, more reserved, but she had a gentle humor and a keen eye for detail. She took to sketching while they talked, filling pages with images of the city and the people in it. "You have real talent," Bear said, watching her work. Mei Hua blushed. "I used to dream of studying art, of painting the world, but that dream is gone now." "Why?" Bear asked. "You are free now. You can study whatever you want." "I have no money, no connections. I am just a Chinese servant girl in a foreign country." Mei Hua's pencil stilled on the page. "You are the daughter of a reformer, the sister of a princess, and a survivor," Bear corrected her. "You are also under my protection now, which means you have the resources to pursue your dreams. When we find your father and get settled somewhere, you will study art. I promise you that." Mei Hua looked at him with wondering eyes. "Why are you so kind to us? We are nothing to you." "You are everything to me," Bear said, glancing at Mei Lin. "Your sister has given me back something I thought I lost forever. Hope, purpose, love. Helping you is the least I can do." When Bear was finally cleared to travel, they booked passage on a lumber ship heading to Portland. The captain was a gruff Norwegian who asked no questions as long as the payment was good. The voyage took 3 days, the ship hugging the coast as it made its way north. Bear spent most of the journey on deck, his injured shoulder aching in the salt air but his spirits high. Mei Lin stood beside him at the rail, watching the endless expanse of ocean, and Bear thought he had never seen anything more beautiful than the way the wind played in her hair. "What are you thinking about?" Mei Lin asked. "How much my life has changed," Bear admitted. "A month ago I was alone in the mountains, convinced I would live and die there. Now I am on a ship with a woman I love and her sister, heading to Oregon to find her father. It is like I am living someone else's life." "Is it a good life?" "It is the best life," Bear said. "As long as you are in it." Mei Lin leaned against him, careful of his injured shoulder. "When we find my father, when this is all over, what will we do?" "What do you want to do?" "I want to build a home. A real home with you. Somewhere peaceful where my father and sister can live with us. Somewhere we can start over and build something good." Mei Lin looked up at him. "Is that too much to ask?" "No," Bear said, feeling emotion tighten his throat. "That sounds perfect." Portland was a booming town, the lumber industry driving rapid growth. The streets were filled with loggers and mill workers, tough men who had come west to make their fortunes in timber. Bear felt more comfortable here than he had in San Francisco, the rougher edge more familiar to his mountain sensibilities. Finding information about Mei Lin's father proved challenging. The logging camps were scattered throughout the forests, and workers came and went constantly. Many kept to themselves, sending money home but avoiding personal connections. Bear and the sisters spent days visiting camps and mills, describing Lin Zexu and asking if anyone had seen him. Finally, at a camp 30 miles outside Portland, they found someone who remembered. A Chinese cook named Wu took one look at Mei Lin's jade pendant, and his eyes went wide. "I know that pendant," Wu said in Cantonese, which Mei Lin translated for Bear. "There was a man here last fall who wore a pendant like that. He worked as a timber cruiser, scouting trees for cutting. He was educated, spoke many languages. Everyone liked him. Where is he now?" Mei Lin asked eagerly. Wu's expression turned grave. "There was an accident. A widowmaker fell wrong during a storm, crushed 3 men. Your father was one of them. I am sorry." Mei Lin swayed and Bear caught her, holding her as she processed the devastating news. Mei Hua began to cry, soft, heartbroken sobs that cut through Bear like knives. "Are you certain?" Bear asked Wu. "Could he have survived?" Wu shook his head. "We buried all 3 men here at the camp. I said prayers for them, including your father. He spoke to me about his daughters before he died. He said he was working to earn enough money to buy back their freedom. He said he would not stop until they were safe." Mei Lin buried her face in Bear's chest, her body shaking with grief. Bear held her, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. He had never met Lin Zexu, but he mourned the man anyway, mourned the injustice of a father who had fought so hard to save his daughters only to die before he could see them free. Wu led them to a small gravesite at the edge of the camp. 3 simple wooden crosses marked the graves. Bear read the names carved into the center cross. Lin Zexu, 1814 to 1866. Mei Lin and Mei Hua knelt before their father's grave, speaking in Cantonese as they performed what prayers and rituals they could remember from home. Bear stood back, giving them space to grieve, his hand resting on the butt of his knife as he watched the camp. Even in this moment of sorrow, he remained vigilant. After an hour, Mei Lin rose. Her face was composed, though tears still streaked her cheeks. "We should go," she said quietly. "Father would not want us to linger in sadness. He died trying to give us a future. We should honor that by living it." They returned to Portland, and Bear rented rooms at a boarding house while they figured out their next steps. Mei Lin was quiet for several days, processing her grief. Bear gave her space but remained close, always available when she needed comfort. One evening, Mei Lin came to his room and curled up beside him on the bed. "Tell me about your father," she said. Bear talked late into the night, sharing memories he had not spoken aloud in years. His father teaching him to track deer through snow, the old man's patient voice explaining how to read the forest. His mother baking bread on Saturday mornings, the smell filling their small farmhouse. His sister's laughter as they played by the creek. "They sound wonderful," Mei Lin said. "They were. I wish you could have met them. I think they would have liked you." Bear paused. "I think they would have understood what you and your family have been through. My father used to say that a man's worth is measured by how he treats those who can do nothing for him." "Your father was wise. He was." Bear looked down at Mei Lin. "What do you want to do now? We can stay here or we can go back to California. We can even go back to the mountains if you want. I just want you to be happy." Mei Lin was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "I want to go back to the mountains," she said finally. "Not to run away or hide, but to build the home we talked about. Somewhere clean and peaceful where Mei Hua can paint and we can start a life together. Is that possible?" "Yes," Bear said without hesitation. "I know a valley in the Sierra Nevadas. It is remote but beautiful with good water and plenty of game. We could build a cabin there, plant a garden. It would be hard work, especially the first few years, but it is possible. Then that is what I want." Mei Lin looked up at him. "But first I want to marry you, properly with witnesses and vows. I want to be your wife, Bear Morrison." Bear's heart swelled. "Are you sure? Once we marry, there is no going back. You will be tied to a rough mountain man with a violent past and an uncertain future." "I am already tied to you," Mei Lin said simply. "In every way that matters. I just want to make it official." They were married a week later in a small church in Portland, with Mei Hua and David Lin as witnesses. The young lawyer had traveled from San Francisco specifically for the occasion, bringing with him legal documents dissolving any remaining claims on the sisters and officially declaring them free citizens. Mei Lin wore a simple blue dress that Mei Hua had sewn for her. and Bear wore the only suit he owned, purchased years ago for his sister's wedding and never worn since. He felt uncomfortable and awkward in the formal clothes, but when he saw Mei Lin walking down the aisle toward him, everything else fell away. The ceremony was brief, conducted by a sympathetic minister who did not blink at the unusual pairing. When Bear said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. When Mei Lin said hers, tears streamed down her face, but her voice never wavered. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said. "You may kiss your bride." Bear cupped Mei Lin's face in his large hands and kissed her gently, aware of the witnesses but not caring. This woman was his wife now, his partner, his everything. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The wedding celebration was small but joyful. David Lin treated them to dinner at the finest restaurant in Portland, and Mei Hua presented them with a beautiful painting she had done of the two of them. Bear standing strong and protective behind Mei Lin, his hand on her shoulder. "This is beautiful," Mei Lin said, touching the canvas reverently. "Thank you, sister." "It is how I see you," Mei Hua said, "strong together." That night, in the privacy of their rented room, Bear and Mei Lin came together as husband and wife. Bear was gentle, mindful of her inexperience, taking his time and making sure she felt safe and loved. Mei Lin responded with a passion that surprised them both, her small hands exploring the hard planes of his muscular body, her lips tracing the scars he had earned in war and wilderness. Afterward, they lay tangled together, the moonlight streaming through the window and painting silver patterns on their skin. "I never thought I could be this happy," Mei Lin whispered. "After everything that happened, I thought I would never feel safe again, never feel whole. But you make me feel both." "You saved me too," Bear said, stroking her hair. "I was half alive before I found you, just going through the motions. You reminded me what it means to truly live." They spent 2 more weeks in Portland, making preparations for their return to California. Bear purchased supplies for building a cabin, tools and seeds, and everything they would need to establish a homestead. Mei Hua decided to come with them, preferring the adventure of a new life in the mountains to staying in a city alone. The journey back to the Sierra Nevadas took 3 weeks. They traveled slowly, partly because of the heavy wagon laden with supplies, and partly because Bear wanted Mei Lin and Mei Hua to adjust to the wilderness gradually. He taught them more survival skills, how to shoot, how to preserve food, how to read weather signs. Both women proved capable students. Mei Hua in particular took to marksmanship, her artist's eye giving her excellent aim. Mei Lin learned to cook over a campfire, producing meals that amazed Bear with their flavor despite limited ingredients. When they finally reached the valley Bear had described, even Bear had to admit it was perfect. Nestled between 2 peaks, the valley was a green jewel fed by a clear stream. Pine and cedar trees provided shelter and building materials. Wildlife was abundant, and the soil looked rich enough for farming. "This is our home," Mei Lin said, looking around with shining eyes. "This is where we will build our future." They set to work immediately. Bear and the sisters fell into an easy rhythm, Bear handling the heavy labor of felling trees and shaping logs while Mei Lin and Mei Hua helped where they could and managed the countless smaller tasks. The cabin took shape slowly, one log at a time, one wall rising after another. During this time, Bear and Mei Lin grew even closer. They talked while they worked, sharing thoughts and dreams, learning each other's quirks and habits. Bear discovered that Mei Lin sang while she worked, soft melodies in Chinese that made the labor seem lighter. Mei Lin learned that Bear had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable, surprising her with observations that made her laugh. The nights were special. After a long day of work, They would sit by the fire and talk while Mei Hua sketched the mountains and the valley. Sometimes Bear would tell stories of his time in the wilderness, hair-raising tales of encounters with bears and mountain lions. Other times, Mei Lin would tell stories from Chinese folklore, tales of dragons and emperors and brave heroes. "You miss China?" Bear asked one night. Mei Lin considered the question. "I miss what China represented: home, safety, family. But the China I knew is gone. The country is changing and my family is scattered. This valley, this cabin, you and Mei Hua, this is my home now. This is where I belong." By the time the first snow fell that November, the cabin was complete. It was a solid structure with a stone fireplace, glass windows, and a loft where Mei Hua could sleep and have space for her art. Bear had even built Mei Lin a kitchen area with a proper stove he had hauled up from Sacramento, determined that his wife should have at least some comforts. Their first winter in the valley was challenging but beautiful. Snow piled high around the cabin, sometimes reaching the windows, but they were warm and safe inside. Bear hunted regularly, keeping them supplied with fresh meat. Mei Lin and Mei Hua preserved vegetables and fruits they had gathered during the fall, filling the root cellar with stores for the long, cold months. Bear taught Mei Lin to snowshoe, and they explored the valley together, marveling at the transformed landscape. Everything was white and pristine, the world remade into something clean and new. Bear showed Mei Lin how to read animal tracks in the snow, how to find the subtle signs of life even in the deepest winter. One evening in late December, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Mei Lin made an announcement that changed everything. "I am pregnant," she said quietly. Bear froze, a piece of wood halfway to the fire. "You are certain?" "Yes. 2 months now, I think." Mei Lin looked at him nervously. "Are you happy?" Happy did not begin to cover what Bear felt. Joy, terror, excitement, and overwhelming love crashed over him in waves. He crossed to Mei Lin and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I am more than happy," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I am honored. Terrified, but honored. You are going to be a mother and I am going to be a father. Our child will grow up here in this valley, free and safe and loved." Tears spilled down Mei Lin's cheeks. "I was afraid you might not want a child so soon. We have only been married a few months." "I want everything with you," Bear said fiercely. "Children, a life, years and years of growing old together. You have given me so much already, and now you are giving me this. I do not have words for how much that means." Mei Hua, who had been watching from her corner, came over and embraced them both. "I am going to be an aunt," she said, smiling through her own tears. "Our father would have been so happy." The pregnancy brought changes to their routine. Bear became even more protective, insisting that Mei Lin rest more and do less strenuous work. Mei Lin protested at first, insisting she was healthy and capable, but eventually she accepted Bear's care with good grace. As spring came to the valley and the snow melted, revealing the green world beneath, Mei Lin's belly grew round with their child. Bear spent hours talking to the baby, his large hand resting on Mei Lin's stomach, feeling the tiny movements within. "What if I am not a good father?" he asked one night. "What if I do not know how to raise a child?" "You will be a wonderful father," Mei Lin said confidently. "You are patient, kind, and strong. You protect those you love without question. Our child will be lucky to have you." "Our child will be lucky to have you as a mother," Bear countered. "You are brave and smart and beautiful. You survived things that would have destroyed most people. You will teach our child to be strong and compassionate." The baby arrived in early September, on a day when the aspens were just beginning to turn gold. Mei Hua acted as midwife, having learned the basics from Mrs. Chen before they left Sacramento. Bear paced outside the cabin like a caged animal, listening to Mei Lin's laboring cries and feeling helpless. When Mei Hua finally emerged and told him he had a son, Bear nearly collapsed with relief. He rushed inside to find Mei Lin exhausted but glowing, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. "Meet your son," Mei Lin said, holding the baby up for Bear to see. Bear took his son carefully, terrified of dropping the fragile bundle. The baby had Mei Lin's delicate features and dark hair, but Bear could see something of himself in the strong chin and broad shoulders even at this young age. The baby opened his eyes and looked at Bear, and in that moment, Bear felt something fundamental shift in his soul. "He is perfect," Bear whispered. "What should we name him?" Mei Lin smiled. "I thought we could name him James after your father, and his middle name will be Zexu after mine." "James Zexu Morrison," Bear said, testing the name. "It is perfect. He carries both our legacies." Watching Bear with baby James became Mei Hua's favorite subject for her paintings. She captured dozens of moments, Bear holding James with surprising gentleness, his massive hands cradling the tiny body with infinite care. Mei Lin nursing James by the fire, her face soft with maternal love. The three of them together, a family forged from tragedy and hardship but stronger for it. As James grew from infant to toddler, the valley seemed to grow with him. Bear expanded the cabin, adding more rooms and a proper workshop. He built Mei Hua a studio where she could paint with good light. He constructed a fence around a garden where Mei Lin grew vegetables and herbs. The family prospered. Bear's hunting and trapping brought in steady income, and Mei Hua began selling her paintings to wealthy families in Sacramento, her talent earning recognition. Mei Lin managed their household with skill and grace, creating a home filled with warmth and laughter. When James was 3, Mei Lin became pregnant again. This time Bear was less terrified and more excited, already imagining James with a younger sibling to play with. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and when their daughter was born in the spring, Bear wept openly at her beauty. They named her Sarah Lynn Morrison, honoring Bear's mother and Mei Lin's heritage. She had her father's blue-gray eyes and her mother's delicate features, a perfect blend of two worlds coming together. Life in the valley fell into a comfortable rhythm. Bear taught James to track and hunt as soon as the boy was old enough to walk in the woods. Mei Lin taught both children to read and write, determined they should have the education she had received. Mei Hua filled their home with art and music, teaching the children to see beauty in the world around them. The camp at Broken Creek became a distant memory, though they sometimes encountered prospectors passing through the mountains. When asked about the Chinese woman living with the mountain man, Bear would simply say, "That is my wife, the mother of my children. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me." No one ever did. Bear's reputation had only grown over the years, and most people were smart enough not to challenge him. But more than that, anyone who spent time with the Morrison family could see the genuine love and happiness that bound them together. Visitors to the valley often remarked on the unusual household, but they also noted the obvious contentment of its inhabitants. Bear and Mei Lin would sit together in the evenings, watching their children play, and the look they exchanged spoke of a bond that went deeper than words. "You ever regret it?" Mei Lin asked one evening, 15 years after they had first met. "Giving up your solitary life in the mountains for all this chaos and responsibility?" Bear looked at the cabin where James, now 18 and tall as his father, was teaching his 12-year-old sister Sarah to whittle. Mei Hua sat nearby, sketching the scene. Inside, the sounds of their third child, a 5-year-old son named Thomas, playing echoed through the open door. Not for a single moment, Bear said. That life was not living, it was just existing. You gave me back my life, Mei Lin. You and our children, you are everything. Mei Lin leaned her head on his shoulder. I was thinking about that day you found me in the mud. I was so scared and desperate. I thought my life was over. I never imagined it was actually just beginning. I saw you digging in that creek, and something in me knew I could not just ride away, Bear said. I think maybe we were meant to find each other. All that suffering, all those hardships, they led us to this moment, this life. You think our children understand how lucky they are? Mei Lin asked. To grow up free, to never know the fear and oppression we faced. They understand enough. We have told them our stories, made sure they know where they come from. Bear squeezed her hand. But more importantly, they are growing up knowing they are loved, that they belong here, that this is their home. That is the greatest gift we can give them. As the years passed, the Morrison family became a fixture in the Sierra Nevadas. James grew into a man very much like his father, tall and powerfully built, with a deep love for the wilderness. He became a guide, leading wealthy tourists through the mountains and earning a reputation for his skill and knowledge. Sarah inherited her mother's intelligence and her aunt's artistic talent. She studied with Mei Lin and eventually began teaching in Sacramento, though she always returned to the valley for summers. She married a young lawyer, much to Bear's approval, and gave Mei Lin and Bear their first grandchildren. Thomas, the youngest, surprised everyone by becoming fascinated with Chinese culture and history. He studied Cantonese with his mother and aunt, pored over the few books they had brought from China, and eventually traveled to San Francisco to learn from scholars in Chinatown. He became a bridge between two worlds, translating and teaching, helping other Chinese immigrants navigate American society. Mei Lin never married, choosing instead to devote her life to her art. She became famous in California, her paintings sought after by collectors across the country. But she always lived in the valley with Bear and Mei Lin, part of the family she had helped build. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Bear and Mei Lin stood at the edge of the valley, looking out over the land they had tamed and made their own. Both were graying now, Bear's beard shot through with silver, Mei Lin's hair streaked with white, but their hands, clasped together, were as strong as ever. We built something good here, Mei Lin said. Not just a home, but a legacy. Our children know who they are and where they come from. They know both pride and humility. That is everything. You built it, Bear said. I just helped. You are the heart of this family, Mei Lin. You always have been. We built it together, Mei Lin corrected. From the moment you lifted me out of that mud, we have been building this together. Two people from different worlds, creating something new. That evening, the entire family gathered at the cabin for a celebration. James and his wife were there with their two children. Sarah and her husband brought their infant daughter. Thomas arrived from San Francisco with books and gifts for everyone. Mei Lin had prepared a special painting, a massive canvas showing the valley through all 4 seasons, with the cabin at the center, smoke rising from its chimney. To family, Bear said, raising his glass. To the journey that brought us together and the love that keeps us strong. To family, everyone echoed. As the celebration continued into the night, Bear found himself remembering that March day in 1867 when he had crested the ridge above Broken Creek and seen a small figure digging desperately in the mud. He had been 30 years old, alone, and convinced his life held no more surprises. How wrong he had been. Mei Lin had not just changed his life, she had given him a life worth living. She had taught him that love was not weakness but the greatest strength. That family was not just blood but the bonds you chose to forge. That home was not a place but the people you gathered around you. Late that night, after the guests had gone to bed and the cabin was quiet, Bear and Mei Lin walked hand in hand through the moonlit valley. The stars blazed overhead, brilliant in the thin mountain air. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled and an owl called from the trees. "Thank you," Bear said quietly. "For what? For everything. For seeing something in me worth saving, for giving me children and grandchildren, for building this life with me, for loving me even when I did not deserve it." Mei Lin stopped and turned to face him, her hands coming up to cup his bearded cheeks. "You have always deserved it, Bear Morrison. From the moment you risked everything to save a desperate woman in the mud, you deserved every bit of love and happiness you have received." Bear kissed her then, softly and sweetly, the kiss of two people who had weathered storms together and emerged stronger. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "I love you," Bear said. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Mei Lin replied. "My mountain man, my protector, my husband, my heart. Forever and always." They walked back to the cabin together, comfortable in the silence, content in the knowledge that they had built something that would last long after they were gone. Their children would tell their children about the mountain man who found a princess in the mud and treated her like royalty. About the love that bridged two worlds and created something beautiful and lasting. As Bear banked the fire for the night and climbed into bed beside his wife, he thought about the different ways a man's life could unfold. He had been a soldier, a killer, a hermit living alone in the wilderness. He had thought that was all he would ever be. But then a small, desperate woman had entered his life, digging in the mud for a piece of her past. And in saving her, he had saved himself. Together, they had built not just a home but a legacy. A family that spanned cultures and continents, bound together by love and respect and unwavering loyalty. It was more than Bear had ever dreamed possible, more than he had ever dared hope for. And as he drifted off to sleep, Mei Lin warm and safe in his arms, Bear knew with absolute certainty that his life had been a good one. Not because of the things he had accomplished or the dangers he had faced, but because he had found love in the most unexpected place and held on to it with everything he had. The valley slept, peaceful under the stars. In the cabin, the Morrison family rested, secure in the knowledge that they were loved, protected, and home. And if sometimes the wind carried whispers of the past of a mining camp where injustice reigned, of a desperate flight through the darkness, of two people from different worlds finding each other, those whispers only served to remind them of how far they had come and how much they had overcome. This was their happily ever after, hard-won and deeply cherished. A mountain man and a Chinese princess, united by fate and bound by love, living out their days in a valley where the past could not reach and the future was whatever they chose to make it. It was everything, and it was enough.